Arabs, they are Christians also.
Yes, I know that, but, you know, I'm limited by my vocabulary.
Thank you, Khalid.
Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you. We have Sughra on the telephone line. Hello, Sughra.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I've been listening. I mean, I've not seen your program from the beginning, but whatever I understand from what you all are saying,
yes,
I think you can't, change, as they say, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Mm-hmm. I think whatever conferences you have, whatever you all have discussions, you should bring the young folk, to this picture. Like me, I'm an Indian, but born in Bahrain, studied in a Catholic school, living in an environment with Iranians and Arabs. So I consider myself a universal person, Mm-hmm. I'll feel at ease in America, in the Middle East, South, in Australia. I feel free anywhere. I mean, I can mix with the people very well. So I think it's the young generation. You should try to bring the young generation to conferences or whatever meetings you'll have, That will be the best thing. And you'll bring religions together. You'll bring harmony in the world.
Thank you, Sughra.
Okay,
yeah,
bye-bye.
Actually, Sughra's point is one thing you raised, Professor, as well in one of your articles. You pointed out that the younger generations is actually, there's hope in the younger generations, and actually they should focus leaders and thinkers on the younger generations, try to promote dialogue among the younger generations.
Well, I think that's recognized in many societies. I've been to Iran many times since the revolution, and I thought it was interesting that when Khatami swept in, I went to a huge conference that was held, and the then minister, Mr. Mahajirani of Culture, made the point that the next conference was going to be for youth. With many of the Muslim organizations that I'm involved with or advise, I often say not just to have conferences that involve youth, and I think that's important. It shouldn't just be, you can have conferences with just youth, but I think it's important to have conferences that involve youth, because the older generation needs to hear the younger generation, particularly because in some cultures the older generation defines the younger generation as anybody under 50. So we're not talking about, really young people. And I think that is critical. But I think also in many organizations, whether in the U.S., and I see that, or overseas, and I see a trend, people are beginning to realize this, the younger generation has to be involved within the kind of advisory boards, etc. Often when you're on an advisory board, everybody around the table is, 50 or 60 and older. There's no reason why you can't have
younger generation
people. And I think that becomes critical. It is, in fact, the younger generation, the next generation, that has an opportunity to be far more pluralistic because of the more pluralistic world in which they were raised. I mean, I was raised as a young person the way many people were. We had neighborhoods in America that were according to your ethnic groups, Italian, Lithuanian, and even religiously, raised in a Catholic environment. But, people who are raised today are raised in a much more pluralistic society. And I just happen to engage a lot of religions because of my own interests. But there are many Americans my age who would simply come out of a very narrow background. I think the same thing is true in many Arab and Muslim societies.
Professor, a lot of Muslims say that what's happening now with of course the global village, and of course with the development and technology in the world, is that in a way America is imposing its culture and its values on the whole world, and that includes the Islamic world. So in a way, what's happening is that a lot of Muslim youth are having an identity crisis. So they don't know whether to belong to the culture which is dominant in the world, or whether to belong to the culture that their forefathers have grew up in, and their religion. So in a way, is that a reason for the conflict?
I think it's a good issue. I mean, in fact, as you know, I often say that what happened in the post-World War II period was that many Arab and Muslim countries gained their independence. They're fighting their culture wars today. Not necessarily war literally, but their culture wars. That much of what we see in terms of the internal stresses within many societies, and not just economic, they're over issues of religious and cultural identity. There's no doubt about that. With regard to the question of American culture, clearly, many leaders, both secular and Islamically oriented, have warned about that. And a danger of globalization can be that it can spread, as it were, the dominant, culture. But, as I said in a conference years ago in Malaysia, on Islam and modernization, and before we even using words like globalization, they were talking about the invasion of Western culture, and I said, it was at a university campus, I said, why don't you go to the other side of the campus and hear all the music which is Western, see all the pirated videos. Who's forcing the youth to buy that? Who's forcing them to buy the clothes? America can't directly force. It puts out a model, okay? They're not forcing them. Kids are freely buying it. Adults are becoming part of the Gucci crowd freely. And the entrepreneurs who are importing and selling it come from that society. So, you know what I mean? It's not exactly as if you've got American culture, which is exported, and then Americans opening up the shops and Americans selling it directly, etc.
But even Europe has this problem as well with the American.
Sure. But then what one has to do, I mean, Europe has the problem, you have to respond to if you will, the American cultural threat. But, you know, this is part of an open market. I mean, you know, people have to realize that. I may not be happy. I certainly don't want to see America forcing its culture on other people. But if you find that people within your society are drawn to a lot of aspects of American culture, the response is not to blame the Americans. The response is to look at yourself and say, well, maybe we're failing in the way in which we're presenting our culture. If we really think our culture is so good and important, then, you know, why aren't we more secure about it? And maybe we just need to promote that better in the schools. Maybe we're not raising that next generation to appreciate the culture more.
On the telephone line. Hello, Majid.
Hello, assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
My question is to this topic.
Yes.
Do Mr. John agree Islam is the best way of life? If the answer is yes, did you embrace Islam? If not, what is the negative side of Islam?
Oh,
please.
Thank you.
Well, I think that Islam, and if you read or follow what I've been saying, that is throughout the years, I mean, I've been somebody who said that Islam is a great religious faith. It's a faith that transforms people's lives, and it's a very important faith. At the end of the day, I am not a Muslim. So, you know, I think many people can feel that way. I mean, I like to think that there are Muslims who respect Christianity and what Christianity, you know, stands for. And I think that that's what's important in our world. Whether or not I am a Muslim is something that or whether or not I would become a Muslim is something that, whether it's myself or somebody else, that's a personal decision.
Yeah, it's between you and God. Professor, one of the things which happened after September the 11th was we heard of a lot of shuttle visits by U.S. administration officials to Islamic countries requesting them to change in a way or modify their education systems. We've seen that happening in Egypt and some Gulf states.
Those are the good old days when they did it for shopping, but go ahead.
So, do you think that's wise to interfere into the education system of these countries?
I think there's a big difference. If you have a concern, there's a big difference between quietly talking to your counterpart, to your ally in many cases, quietly doing that, as opposed to publicly posturing and appearing to, by going public, to be telling another country what they have to do. I think there's a difference. I certainly think people have a right. I mean, let's face it, I'm here. Part of our discussion tonight is people talking about what's wrong with America and how America ought to change, etc. But when you're at the level of government and rulers, if an Arab ruler has a major problem, you know, with the American president, I think the first thing is you do it privately. If you feel that going public then becomes necessary, for example, as I said earlier with regard to the Palestinian issue, if you feel that your private entreaties haven't worked, your sort of vague general statements, you know, haven't been heard, then you might want to get stronger. But I think that it is counterproductive for the American government to project an image that it is trying to dictate, and that's the way it's often perceived, to the government of Egypt or to Saudi Arabia what they ought to be doing with the curriculum. And certainly I think it also has to be done in a very modified way. There may be problems in the Egyptian and the Saudi curriculum, but just as there are problems in a lot of other people's curriculum, in terms of, I mean, many here could, as many Americans, could critique American culture in terms of the violence that is in our media, and it contributes to violence, our attitude towards guns, etc. But I think that it's counterproductive to engage in a kind of public criticism, what seems to be a public criticism, and a public posture, and more than that, to give the impression that one is going to attempt to twist the arm of someone else. I think you use a lot of incentives, etc., to get your way.
Professor, what are, in your opinion, the main challenges facing Islam or the Islamic countries in the years to come, especially after what happened in September?
Very briefly, because in my book I talk about the U.S., and I've already been through that in terms of re-examining U.S. foreign policy. I think Muslim governments are challenged to open up their systems, more political participation, more human rights, etc., to represent the very ideals that many Muslims like to say that Islam represents. They're challenged not to see the war on terrorism as a green light, which will enable them to be even more repressive towards any and all opposition, as many of the Central Asian governments have. Feeling that, as in the Cold War, that as long as they're allies with America,